Hi there and welcome, I'm Shane. In this video, I'm going to be stripping down this Selectamatic valve chest that you see right here. This is what controls the hydraulic functions for the lift arms on my uncle's David Brown 990 tractor. If you're new to the channel, I've been doing a series of videos getting this valve chest out of it to diagnose and fix an issue where that spool valve right there was stuck in a position where the lift arms were always in a state of constant lift. They never would go down. I'm also going to go into a bit of detail on the variants of the bypass valve there and some tips on removing stuck bypass valves and hole valves. So if you're interested in seeing me strip this valve chest all the way down, well, I don't do the TCU valve, but mostly strip down this valve chest and get it cleaned up, stay with me. All right, as you can see, I've got the valve chest mounted in a vise. Let's go through what these valves are. These two are accessible from the top of the tractor. Hold valve, bypass valve, spool valve, hold relief valve, rate of lowering valve, non-return valve, latching valve, and this one is the needle valve for the lowering control. I kept calling this one in an earlier video the rate of lowering valve, but that's not right. This is the needle valve for lowering control. This one is the rate of lowering valve. The TCU valve is underneath. I'm not messing with the TCU valve on this tractor, so I'm not taking it out. Many years ago, I posted on the David Brown Tractor Forum on the best tool to use to loosen these plugs. And Cliff, or DB2D, on the forums replied and said to use a drag link socket. Thank you, Cliff. This has been a really good addition to my toolbox, and it's been great for loosening these plugs. It fills the slot. Now I did have to grind it down to make it fit. That's okay. This is the thing that this is used for, is loosening these plugs and valves on this valve chest. All right, let's open the bypass valve. And I'm gonna go ahead and loosen the hold valve while I'm here. This is the needle valve for lowering control. I'm going to remove it. We just untwist it and it comes right out. And as you can see, the tip of it is bent. Okay. All right, let's get into this bypass valve. This is an S3 valve chest. The bypass valve in here is different. We have a plug and a sealing washer. Then we have a metering pin. You see that metering pin there? It's different than what you've seen on the channel for the other valve chest I took apart. And we have a spring. And then we'll go down and get the valve body itself. Before we do that, if there's a brass plug down in here with a slot on it, if you can get a screwdriver down in there and turn your bypass valve a little bit and check that it's free in the bore, then you shouldn't have any problem getting it out. If it won't turn with you putting a screwdriver down in there in that brass plug and trying to turn it, then you'll have to do some things to get it out, and we'll cover those here in a few minutes. Since mine's free, use a magnet, kind of a snatching motion. Try not to push it back down in the bore. There it is. It's the valve body. Let's see if I can get you a visual down inside of it there. You can see the brass plug and a slot in it. All right, I'm going to run a screwdriver down in there and take that brass plug and unscrew it. It's UNF threads, fine thread. I'm going to dump it out in my hand here. Now, be very careful when you do this. There is a restrictor washer underneath this brass plug, and it may come out and stay attached to this brass plug when you take the plug out. In my case, the restrictor washer stayed down in there. Oop, where'd it go? I may have just lost that on camera. Nope, there it is. Okay, whew, I found it. Be careful with this. This is a restrictor washer. You may notice something a little different about this one if you've seen my video before or taken apart David Brown's valve chest. This restrictor washer has a bigger hole in the center. We'll talk about that in a moment as well. For an S3 valve chest, bypass valve, plug, sealing washer, metering pin, the metering pin washer, spring, the brass plug, the restrictor washer, and the valve body for the bypass valve. The preferred method to remove a stuck bypass valve is to use a 3/8 inch bolt with fine threads, UNF threads. It will thread down into the valve body just fine. It's the same thread pitch as the brass plug. One thing you can do is put a socket over the top of it. This is a 9/16 socket. The head here is 9/16 to make it kind of a rudimentary slide hammer. You know, I'm pretending this is down in, your valve body would be stuck down in the bore. Screw in your bolt to the valve body. And let's just pretend that it's stuck, right? You would use this to pop the valve body out, just like that. There are different variations of the valve chest. This one is an S3. The one I worked on previously was an S2. I'll put a visual up on the screen here of the different bypass valve configurations. As you can see in the first column there on the left, that's the one we worked on previously in the earlier video I did on the channel for taking apart a Selectamatic valve chest. The second column is the one we're working on here. This is for an S3 type valve chest. It's a variation. It's for a little bit later models. And then later on, they did away with a metering pin approach and went back to the way that they did it in the S2 valve chest series. So for the S3 series, the hole in the bypass restrictor has been increased from 0.022 to 0.069. And a metering pin is now attached to the bypass valve cap. Well, it's not attached really, it's poked up in there. The pin is stationary and protrudes through the restrictor so that the bypass valve moves up and down. The metering pin controls the area of the restrictor and also provides a self-cleaning action. So basically, when you reinstall this, I can't keep my hands on that thing. I cannot lose that. I'm all fumble fingered today, and that's not a good thing to be whenever you're working on a valve chest. So basically, this metering pin is designed to go through this restrictor washer. Just like that. So for S2 valve chest and S4 valve chest, and you can see what it is by looking at the bottom of the valve chest, it'll have it stamped on it. You'll have a restrictor washer and a nylon filter. For this one, an S3 valve chest, I have the setup you see here. No nylon filter, and the restrictor washer diameter of the hole in the middle is increased. So hopefully that goes over a little bit of the differences between all of these. I'm going to link the manual that I read that from down in the comments below. Thank you to David Monkhouse for providing that to me. I had missed that one on the Google Drive where all the other manuals are, and it was very helpful. All right, let's get this whole valve out of here. We have the plug and the sealing washer. We have a spring. You'll have a retainer with 3 holes down in here, and you will have a ball. Oop, there we go. It popped out. Good. And on this one, we do not have the 3-hole plate or the 3-hole retainer. We just have the ball and the valve body itself. I'm not sure on this tractor if there was ever a 3-hole plate here. It wasn't here, and I'm not sure if somebody had been in here before me and had lost it, or if it was just never there. There are discrepancies on the diagrams. In some diagrams, this 3-hole plate is there. In some diagrams, it's not. I did a search on the David Brown Forum Archive, shameless plug, that's a site that I run, and has all the old posts from the David Brown Forum up to about 2018 or so. I found several from Oleg, Carl. The disc with the 3 holes is there to keep the ball in the bottom of the valve plunger. If the ball shoots up, it can get trapped in the end of the dump valve if you've got a dump valve fitted. And if the ball ends up above the disc, it'll affect the TCU pressure as the ball acts as a non-return valve for the TCU pressure. This 3-hole restrictor plate, which is missing on mine, and the ball has nothing to do with the lift, hold, and lowering of the hitch. These parts are there to act as a non-return valve for TCU pressure only, nothing else. The system will work fine without the ball and the shim on top of it, but you will not be able to adjust the TCU pressure. Nobody really uses the TCU functions, the traction control functions of these Selectamatic tractors much anymore. So I'm doing some investigation on whether or not I need to have this in there. I don't use TCU functions on this tractor. I don't believe anybody will. But just from a completionist standpoint, should it have the plate in there or not? Probably so. If your whole valve is stuck in the bore, you can drive a wooden dowel. This is the recommended thing on the forums. You can drive a wooden dowel down into the valve body itself and work it to to try to loosen the valve in the bore. That's worked for me on many occasions. I don't have a dowel the right size to kind of demonstrate that, but I have also used a concrete anchor in the past just to kind of fit down in there and pull it out. I'll try to, just something that'll fit down in that valve bore. That you can wedge in there to try to get it to turn or to get it to come out, like so. Kind of simulating using a dowel here, or you can use, like I've got a concrete anchor here. I don't know what size this is, but something that fit. All right, so that's the bypass and hole valves off an S3 valve chest. We've got the parts that you see right here. I'm going to bag them up and we'll continue on to the next ones. All right, let's go after the latching valve next. It's right here. This amplifies the signal from the spool valve to provide positive closing of the bypass valve. All right, for the latching valve, we should have the plug itself. A spring. And the plunger for the latching valve. Let's see how stuck this is. It's not. Good. And there's the plunger for the latching valve. It's dirty in there. I think I'm going to try to get an ultrasonic cleaner. Next, we're going to tackle the rate of lowering valve here. This controls the release of oil through the hold valve to the reservoir. In here, we'll have the plunger, a spring, and a plug. And the needle that goes on the front right here is also part of this valve, which we've already removed. So we have the plug, the spring, and the plunger itself. And These are the components of the rate of lowering valve. We have the plug, the spring, the plunger, and also the needle valve that goes into the front of the valve chest also counts as part of that rate of lowering valve assembly parts. Okay, next we'll cover the non-return valve. This prevents feedback between the hold and lift circuits. Use a 15/16 socket to remove. So we have the plug and sealing washer, a spring, and a plunger. So for the non-return valve, we have the plug, the sealing washer, the spring, and the plunger. All right, now we're going to go after the hold relief valve. This relieves shock loading in the hold circuit. We should have a plug here. Plug, spring, plunger, I had to turn the valve chest so I could see down in there. You were right in my way, but I'm trying to get you the best view possible, but I've still got to work on it. All right, so we've got the plug, the spring, and the plunger out. Parts list says I've got a shim, a seat, and a restrictor washer still down in there. That must be the shim. Ah, there's multiple. There's actually 3 shims here. Let's see here. I'm going to take a punch. I'm not going to tap it with a hammer, but I am just going to tap along the edges. All right, now let's see if it'll come out of there. I don't even think I needed to tap it. This is the seat. And then down inside should be a restrictor washer. That might be aluminum. It's not magnetic. Well, let me unhook the valve chest. I turned the valve chest over and beat it on the table here, and it wouldn't come out, but this is probably wrong. Somebody correct me. Oh, look, it's free. I must have jarred it free last time I beat it on the table. And there's why it was stuck. You see all that nastiness on the bottom? All right, for the hold relief valve, we have the plug, the spring, the plunger, 3 shims in my case. You may have different ones, I don't know. I've got 3. A seat and a restrictor washer that goes into the very bottom. Be careful with this. All right, I've flipped the valve chest up so that the spool valve is horizontal. We take those nuts off and get the spool valve out. However, I've got to get the abutment plate off so the spool valve will pass by it. There's some shims behind here, and it's held on by 1 bolt right there. On the other tractor, I never did this part with the spool valve. I left it in. I didn't mess with the abutment plate, so this will be the first time I've ever taken the spool valve and an abutment plate off of a valve chest. So we'll see how it goes. Those of you that watched my last video, I just got done adjusting this to make it right, but since I was able to adjust it, I feel fairly confident I can get this thing adjusted again. So I'm going to take the spool valve out. But first, we have to get this abutment plate out. This is a 3/16 hex driver deal. There are shims behind the abutment plate. That's part of the adjustments that you have to do. There's the bolt. Oh, it's on a dowel. Okay. Looks like a good stack of shims on there. I don't know how many just yet. All right, abutment plate is off. Now we'll work on the nuts on top of the spool valve. If you didn't watch my last video, I did have to grind down a wrench to make it fit on the nut that's closest to the valve, so that the other one would fit on there with it to unlock these. So I'm using a ground down 7/16 wrench here. There we go. All right, first nut is off. First time I've ever done this, guys. On camera. No, first time I'm ever doing it, and I'm doing it on camera. If y'all get to see this part, it means I was successful. The threads at the top of the spool valve are a little bit boogered up. Being very careful. I don't want to take that nut off just to not be able to get it back on. There's the washer. All right, I should be able to push the spool valve out now. I hope. What holds it in there? Okay, there we go. That was tight in there. And here's the big reveal for me. There is the spool valve. Looks pretty good to me. I'm gonna clean it up and see, but I don't see any corrosion. I don't see a lot of corrosion on that. Looks okay. I'm trying to get y'all close-up shots of all of this. There's a spool valve. Cool. As you can see here, we've got the valve chest turned upside down. This is where the abutment plate just came from, and the spool valve came out of that hole right there. The last valve that we're just going to talk about here is the TCU valve. This is what controls traction control pressure in the TCU mode. It's not a function that I use on the tractors that we have here. I only use height and depth control. I don't necessarily care about the TCU functions. All I really care about is if this thing actually moves, and it does. If you want to take yours out, it's got kind of a weird setup. You can maybe have to make a special tool for it. I can't remember, but it's got a ferrule, a plug here that's got slots on either end, and the valve body itself pooches up through the center of that plug. So you might have to make a tool to get in there and loosen that. I don't want to mess it up, and I don't use it, so I'm not taking it out. If you do, you'll find that there's the plug itself that's got the slot that the valve body pops up through. You've got the valve body, the plunger itself, then you'll have a spring under that, and then a steel ball underneath that. But I'm not going to take it out. Sorry, folks. Partial disassembly of a Selectamatic valve chest, I guess. Or mostly disassembled. But it is now disassembled as far as I want to take it. I'm going to clean it up and clean up the valves. I'm not going to put any sandpaper on them or anything. I'm just going to basically use an ultrasonic cleaner. All right, what you see in front of you here is a brand new to me, well, it's brand new actually, a Vivor digital ultrasonic cleaner. It's got heating and a timer on it. And we're going to dump the valve chest into a, I think, 4 parts water to 1 part simple green. It's a mild degreaser. and we're going to try it out on the valve chest. I've already done the actual valve components out of the valve chest, with the exception of the aluminum ones. I'd read that ultrasonic cleaners can deteriorate aluminum, so I'm not putting those in there. There's only a couple of aluminum parts in the valve chest, so I'm going to clean those manually. But all the other valves came out of there looking good, and you'll see that when I put everything on the table. I messaged several people to ask about if there was any detriment to using an ultrasonic cleaner on the valve chest and the valves. Barry, Man from the Mist, he said that it should be fine. Lance Maskell, Bundy Bear Shed, he said it should be fine. Stuart at Barclay Williams, he replied that it wouldn't cause any issues popping it into an ultrasonic cleaner. They have one there. I've got it set to 52C, and it's going to take a minute to get up there. And once that gets up there, I'll set this on about 10 to 15 minutes and let her eat. Our soup is ready. Oh yeah. 52C is what it's set at. 51C is where it's currently sitting. Should be all right. Start. There's trash already floating to the top. I'll bring you back when it's done. And we're done. Let's take a look at how the soup did. Oh, that's nasty. Yikes. Contents will be hot or warm-ish. If I'm going to do a review on this thing, on this ultrasonic cleaner, maybe make the basket a little bit more heavy duty. It took most of the paint off. Interesting. I got to get this thing dry. Now remember, I did not take the TCU valve out. Let's see if it still moves. Oh yeah. We'll go and blow this out with some compressed air. Okay, I've blown it out pretty well. Dried it off as best I can. One thing I noticed, I didn't get this on camera. Maybe I should have. Down at the bottom of the spool valve hole down here around the edges of the casting was a little bit of rust. Down in here, around the edges. And I think that's what was causing binding of the spool valve in here. If I look down the bore, I don't know if you can see it down in through there. The actual valve bore looks good for the spool valve. I don't see any marks or anything like that on it. Looks really smooth. Around in there, right around in the edge right here where the bottom of the spool goes in, this all area right here was rusted up a little bit. But now it's not. That's very interesting. And to keep it from rusting, I'm going to hit it with some oil. All right, I'm just going to dump some oil in here with this thing. Kind of keep it from rusting. Okay, that should be sufficiently oily. Next step will be to display all this and reassemble. But I'm going to do that in the next video. This one's long enough already, and I don't want it to be a 2-hour video. So in the next one, I'll be reassembling the valve chest, putting the valves back in. I'll also be setting the travel on the spool valve. I'll be putting the valve chest back on the right-hand ramshaft bracket, and I'll be doing the setting 1 adjustment where you use the setting tool. I've got one here from Man from the Mist and one from Bundy Bear Shed. They can 3D print those if you want one. But yeah, thanks for watching. Y'all have a good day.